Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. Tommy Bradford never liked driving in the snow. He had always been a cautious man, a trucker who liked to take his time on the road, avoid risky routes, and make sure his deliveries were safe. But this time, the storm had caught him off guard. It had come out of nowhere, wild and unforgiving, blanketing the narrow country roads with snow so thick that his headlights barely made a dent in the white abyss ahead. He had been driving for hours, the truck rattling and swaying with every gust of wind. The snow pelted against the windshield, and the wipers worked overtime to clear the thickening layer, but it was no use. Visibility was almost nothing. Still, he pressed on. He had a delivery to make, and the company he worked for depended on him. It wasn't just about the job, it was about keeping his promises, about being the kind of man who could get things done no matter what. But now, miles from any town, deep in the wilderness, Tommy was beginning to regret that decision. The storm was only getting worse. The wind howled like a living thing, whipping the snow around in chaotic patterns. The road, once a well-worn path, had become nothing more than a thin, ice-covered ribbon snaking through the woods. His tires had already slipped twice, and Tommy knew it was only a matter of time before they slid off the edge and into the unknown. He cursed under his breath, trying to keep his mind focused. This wasn't the time for panic, but as he squinted through the windshield, trying to make out the road ahead, something caught his eye. A faint shadow. At first, he thought it was a trick of the snowstorm, an illusion created by the swirling flakes and the harsh winds. But no, there it was again. A figure standing right in the middle of the road. His heart skipped a beat. Who would be out here in a blizzard, in the middle of nowhere? Tommy's truck was one of the few vehicles on this road, and he hadn't seen another car in hours. He slammed his foot on the brake, the truck screeching as it slowed down. His stomach tightened as the figure slowly came into clearer view. It was a man. He was dressed in what looked like a Navy officer's coat, but the details were hard to make out. The coat flapped in the wind, the man's figure barely visible against the blizzard. Tommy's first instinct was to drive away, to get out of there as fast as possible. But then his mind raced. What if this was someone who needed help? What if they were stranded just like him? He couldn't just leave someone out here in these conditions. He slowed the truck to a stop, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring into the swirling white void. Tommy swallowed hard. He had no idea what to do. Should he roll down the window? Should he shout out? Was it even safe to get out of the truck? His gaze never left the figure. There was something eerie about the way the man stood there. Something deliberate. It was as if he was waiting for Tommy. "Hey!" Tommy called out, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Are you okay?" No response. The man didn't even flinch. Tommy's breath quickened, and he felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't right. The man's stillness, his silence, it felt wrong. Tommy had dealt with strange situations on the road before, people breaking down, needing help. But this felt different. It wasn't just a man in need. It was like he was part of the storm itself, part of the blizzard, an element of nature, something out of place. Tommy's mind raced. He had to do something. This wasn't just a random passerby. That coat, it wasn't normal. He couldn't place it, but it was military. Tommy had seen enough movies, enough documentaries to recognize that this wasn't a typical jacket. And there was something in the way the man stood, the eerie quiet in his presence. It was almost as if Tommy had driven right into a scene from another time. He wasn't sure what to do, but he couldn't leave the man out there, not when the snow was falling faster and the winds were only growing harsher. Tommy stepped out of the truck, and the cold hit him like a slap to the face. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself, squinting through the storm. The man didn't move, didn't acknowledge him at all. It was as if the stranger was waiting for Tommy to come to him, Tommy's boots crunched through the snow as he took a few tentative steps forward, his breath visible in the cold air. The man's eyes were locked on him now, though the figure's face remained hidden beneath the collar of the navy jacket. There was something unsettling about the way he looked, steady, intense, but not a hint of fear or concern in his gaze. It was as though the man had been standing there forever, waiting, watching. "Are you lost?" Tommy asked, his voice shaky but firm. The man didn't answer. Tommy moved closer, and that's when he saw it. There, just behind the figure, almost completely obscured by the snow, was a vehicle. A navy jeep buried up to its wheels in snow, its headlights dim. The sight sent a chill down Tommy's spine. There was no way a jeep would be out here in the storm, not unless someone had been sent on a mission. Tommy's pulse quickened. Was this part of some military operation? Had the man been stranded, or was something else going on? "Who are you?" Tommy asked again, this time more urgently. His instincts were on edge. There was something about the man's silence that didn't sit right. He was out here for a reason, but what was that reason? The figure slowly turned, his head tilting slightly, his eyes never leaving Tommy's. His lips barely moved when he spoke, but Tommy heard the words clearly in the howling wind. "They know you're coming." Tommy's heart skipped a beat. "What?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and began to move away, retreating into the blizzard. Tommy's feet felt frozen to the ground, but somehow he found the strength to follow. "No, wait," Tommy called, taking a few hurried steps after him. But the man didn't stop. Tommy reached out, grabbing the man's arm. The coat was cold, almost unnaturally so. The man's body was stiff, unmoving. It felt like he wasn't even real, like he was a part of the storm, part of the landscape itself. The man turned his head again, his eyes cold and emotionless. "Leave now," he whispered, "before it's too late." Tommy's grip loosened, his mind racing with questions. What was this? Who was this man, and what did he mean, "They know you're coming"? And what had the man meant by before? "It's too late." The stranger stepped back, his figure slowly disappearing into the blizzard. Tommy stood still for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should he go after him? Was this some kind of trick? But then something caught his eye. The jeep, the navy jeep. He had to see it. He had to understand what was going on. With trembling hands, Tommy approached the vehicle. He opened the door, the cold air blasting into his face, and sat down behind the wheel. The jeep was eerily silent, as if no one had touched it for a long time. On the passenger seat, there was a crumpled piece of paper, the ink smudged, but still legible. Tommy picked it up, his heart racing as he read the first line, "Operation failed." His stomach dropped. Before he could process what he had just read, a noise, distant, faint, caught his attention. The sound of tires on snow. Someone was coming. Tommy's blood ran cold. Tommy Bradford didn't know what to think. The storm was still relentless, howling outside, but inside the jeep he felt a strange sense of warmth, not from the vehicle itself, but from the urgency of the situation. His fingers trembled as he held the crumpled paper, reading it again. "Operation failed." He blinked, the words barely making sense. The paper was damp, the ink smudged in places, but there was something unsettling about it, something that made his blood run cold. The man in the navy uniform, the one who had appeared out of nowhere, had said, "They know you're coming." And now Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The sound of tires crunching in the snow grew louder. Tommy's heart skipped a beat. His breath fogged up the windshield as he looked through the frozen glass, searching for any sign of the vehicle that was approaching. It wasn't just the noise that unsettled him, it was the timing. How had someone found him so quickly? It felt like the storm itself was conspiring against him, keeping him trapped in this frozen world, in the midst of something far bigger than he could understand. Tommy's mind raced. He quickly shoved the paper into his coat pocket. The cold metal of the Jeep's steering wheel biting into his palms. He glanced around, trying to think of his next move. Should he stay put? Should he drive off and try to escape? He had no idea who was coming, but one thing was certain. The presence of the Jeep, the stranger's cryptic words, and the mysterious failure of an operation all pointed to something far more dangerous than just a snowstorm. As the sound of the approaching vehicle grew louder, Tommy's instincts kicked in. He wasn't going to stick around and wait to find out who it was. He couldn't. He had no idea what was happening, but the situation was escalating faster than he could process. Without thinking, Tommy yanked the Jeep's gearshift into drive, slammed his foot on the gas, and slammed the door shut behind him. The tires spun for a moment, struggling against the thick snow and ice, but they finally found grip, and the Jeep lurched forward. Tommy didn't look back, not even for a second. His eyes were fixed ahead, scanning the road for any sign of danger, the heavy snowflakes blurring everything in front of him. He had to get away. The storm was still howling, but in his gut, he knew he was running from something far, worse than the weather. But as he drove through the swirling storm, the Jeep's headlights cut through the darkness, and Tommy's mind kept drifting back to the stranger. Who was he? What had he meant by, "They know you're coming"? And the paper, "Operation Failed." Tommy's thoughts spiraled out of control. There had been no military activity in this area. He knew this road. It was isolated, unused, and miles away from the nearest base. No one would be out here, not unless they had a specific reason, and that reason was now firmly tied to him. Minutes passed. The snow didn't relent. The Jeep's engine growled and hummed beneath him, the only sound in a world that felt eerily silent otherwise. Tommy glanced in the rearview mirror, but the swirling snow obscured everything behind him. He couldn't see the road behind him. He couldn't even be sure if he was being followed. But the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach wouldn't go away. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He had been in tense situations before, but this felt different. The fear was there, palpable. But there was something else too, a sense of inevitability. He didn't know what was coming, but he felt in his bones that whatever it was out of his control. Tommy's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he drove, the wheels slipping and sliding over the slick road. He could barely see anything now. The snow was falling so heavily that the world outside his windows had become a blur of white. Every now and then, the Jeep's headlights would cut through the haze, illuminating a snowdrift or the jagged outline of a tree. But there was nothing else. No sign of life, no other vehicles, just the relentless storm and the cold. Suddenly, there was a flicker of movement on the road ahead. Tommy's heart leaped in his chest. Was it the man in the Navy uniform? Had he somehow found him again? But as the figure grew clearer, Tommy saw something much more unsettling. A large black SUV parked at the side of the road, its headlights off. It wasn't just any vehicle. It was a military-grade SUV, dark and imposing, built for rough terrain and tough conditions. Tommy's breath caught in his throat. This was no coincidence. This was no random car. Someone had been waiting for him. The Jeep jerked forward as Tommy instinctively hit the brakes, the tires screeching on the ice. The SUV didn't move. It was as if it was waiting for him, just as the man in the Navy uniform had. For a moment, Tommy debated turning around, driving away, but he quickly realized that would only lead him deeper into the storm. There was no way out now. Not unless he confronted whatever was going on. He slowed the Jeep down, the tires crunching, over the snow as he approached the SUV. As he drew closer, Tommy's eyes darted between the vehicle and the road ahead. The air felt heavier now, the silence more oppressive. He reached for the door handle, but something made him stop. His hand froze mid-air, and he looked again at the SUV. There were no tracks in the snow around it. No tire marks leading up to it. It was as if it had materialized out of nowhere. Who the hell are these people? Tommy muttered to himself. His gut twisted in a way that told him everything was wrong. There was no way a military vehicle could be out here, not like this. There was no mission he knew of, no operation, nothing. Whoever was involved, whatever this was, it was bigger than anything Tommy had ever encountered. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He had to make a decision. He had to know what was going on. Tommy parked the Jeep a safe distance away from the SUV, his eyes locked on the dark figure inside. The windows were tinted, the interior completely hidden from view. For a long moment, Tommy simply stared at it, his mind racing, his hands gripping the wheel. Then, without warning, the SUV's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a black tactical jacket, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. He didn't move immediately. He stood there, just watching Tommy, as if waiting for him to make the first move. Tommy felt a chill crawl down his spine. He didn't know what this man wanted, but he could feel the tension in the air, like a spark just waiting to ignite. The man took a step forward. Tommy's heart began to pound in his chest. "Get out of the Jeep," the man said, his voice low and commanding. Tommy's mind raced. The last thing he wanted to do was step out of the Jeep, not with this person approaching. But there was something in the man's voice, a hidden threat, something cold and calculating that made Tommy's instincts flare. "I said get out." There was no room for negotiation. Tommy had no choice. He opened the door slowly, his movements deliberate, trying to mask the unease that gripped him. He stepped out into the cold, snow crunching beneath his boots. The man didn't speak at first. He just sized Tommy up, his eyes scanning him from head to toe. Tommy's stomach twisted. He was used to intimidation, but this man wasn't just intimidating. He radiated danger. "What do you want?" Tommy asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man's lips curled into a cold smile. "You're in the middle of something much bigger than you think. I suggest you start talking. What do you know about the operation?" Tommy's mind raced again, his thoughts racing back to the crumpled paper in his pocket. The operation. The failed operation. "I don't know anything about any operation," Tommy replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm just a truck driver. I don't even know what you're talking about." The man's eyes narrowed. "Then you're in deeper than you think, and you need to start talking before it's too late." Tommy's mind spun. What had he stumbled into? What had this storm uncovered? And more importantly, what did this man want with him? Tommy Bradford stood in the falling snow, every inch of his body screaming to run, to escape whatever trap had been set for him. The man in the black tactical jacket, the one who had stepped out of the military SUV, was still standing in front of him, his eyes cold and calculating, the snow swirling around them as though nature itself was conspiring to bury them in its grasp. "You need to tell me what you know," the man said, his voice low, almost bored, but there was a dangerous edge to it, a warning that Tommy couldn't ignore. "The clock's ticking." Tommy swallowed hard. The words from the man were like a threat wrapped in an enigma. What clock? What was he talking about? And why had he singled Tommy out? The man clearly had no intention of letting him go until he had the answers he wanted. Tommy's mind spun as he looked at the SUV, still parked a few feet away, the tinted windows hiding the occupants inside. He couldn't make out their faces, but he could feel the weight of their gaze on him, invisible, but pressing. The man in front of him was only one part of something much larger, something that had been set in motion long before Tommy had ever driven down this snow-covered road. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tommy said, trying to steady. His voice, though it felt like every word was a lie, every breath a battle against the rising panic in his chest. "I'm just a truck driver. I'm trying to get home. I don't know anything about any operation or—" "Cut the crap!" the man interrupted, taking a step forward. His boots crunched through the snow, his eyes never leaving Tommy's. "I don't have time to play games. You've been involved in something you don't even understand, and now you're a part of it. Do you really think you can just drive away from this? Tommy took a half step back, his heart pounding in his ears. He was trapped. There was no getting out of this now. He had no answers to give, no understanding of what was happening. But something inside him told him that the truth, whatever it was, wasn't going to be pretty. I don't know who you are or what you want, but I'm just passing through, Tommy said, desperation creeping into his voice. Please let me go. I haven't done anything. I don't even know who you people are. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, scanning Tommy's face as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Then, with a small, cold smile, he spoke again. But this time his tone was almost pitying. Do you think that's going to get you out of this? You think you can play the innocent victim, that I'll just let you go because you're scared? You're in this. Now, whether you like it or not, there's no turning back. Tommy's mind raced. There had to be a way out. He couldn't just stand here and let this man take him wherever they wanted to go. He had a family. He had a life. He wasn't going to let these people drag him into whatever dark world they were hiding in. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that whatever this was, whatever operation he had stumbled into, it was already too late for him to turn back. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly, making sure Tommy could see it. Tommy's stomach tightened as he saw the crumpled paper, the same one he had found in the Navy Jeep. The words, "Operation Failed," were written in bold, black ink. Tommy's breath caught in his throat. This was real. This was no accident. This was bigger than a random encounter in a snowstorm. This was about something much more dangerous. Do you recognize this? The man asked, holding the paper out to Tommy. Tommy glanced at the words, his heart sinking. Yeah, I found it in the Jeep, the one I found earlier, out here in the storm. The man's expression didn't change. He just looked at Tommy as if expecting something more. But Tommy had nothing left to say. He was a pawn in someone else's game, a game he didn't understand. You don't get it, the man said softly, almost as if talking to himself. This was never supposed to happen. This operation, this mission, it was all supposed to be a success. We were so close. Tommy's mind buzzed with confusion. Mission, operation, success. What are you talking about? What was supposed to happen? Who are you people? The man ignored Tommy's question, his gaze distant, his mind seemingly elsewhere. We were supposed to retrieve something valuable, something that would change everything. The mission was going according to plan, until it wasn't. That's when it all fell apart. Tommy's head was spinning. He had no idea what this man was rambling about. What was the mission? What were you after? The man's eyes flickered back to Tommy. There was a brief flash of something, anger, frustration, before he seemed to force it down, replacing it with a cold calm. It doesn't matter now, the man said, his voice hard. What matters is that you're part of it now. You've been involved whether you like it or not. Tommy swallowed. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. He had to get away. He couldn't stay here, not when it seemed like the man was about to reveal something he didn't want Tommy to know. But Tommy had no idea how to escape. His Jeep was parked a few yards away, but even if he made a run for it, what were the chances he could outrun these people in the middle of a blizzard? He had to do something, anything, to gain control of the situation. Who else is involved? Tommy asked, trying to sound calm, though his heart was racing. Who else is part of this? The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his head slightly as if listening for something in the distance. Tommy's breath caught. Was someone else coming? Or was the man just stalling? Finally, the man looked back at Tommy, his face expressionless. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but you're going to find out soon enough. Tommy's mind raced, trying to process everything the man was saying. This wasn't just some strange encounter. This was part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than he could comprehend. But what was the connection to him? Why had they chosen him, a random truck driver, to be a part of this twisted story? Before Tommy could speak again, the man stepped back, signaling to the SUV. The door opened, and out stepped another figure, a woman, tall and thin, with dark, intelligent eyes. She wore the same tactical jacket as the man, but she seemed calmer, more controlled. The woman didn't look at Tommy immediately. Instead, she glanced at the man, her face unreadable. There was an almost imperceptible nod between them before she turned her attention to Tommy. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. "Is he telling the truth?" she asked, her voice cool but with an undercurrent of something sharp, something dangerous. "I don't think he knows anything," the man replied, his tone clipped. "But he's already involved, whether he likes it or not." The woman's eyes locked onto Tommy, and for a brief moment he thought he saw a flicker of sympathy in them before it was quickly replaced with cold professionalism. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to move now." Tommy's confusion deepened. "Move where? What is going on? What do you want from me?" The woman's expression hardened, and she turned her back on him, walking toward the SUV. The man followed her, but before he entered the vehicle, he glanced back at Tommy, his eyes calculating. "Get in," the man said. "You'll find out soon enough." Tommy's legs felt like lead as he stood there, torn between the overwhelming urge to run and the overwhelming sense of inevitability that weighed him down. These people were not letting him go. They were not going to explain anything to him. They were just going to drag him deeper into this mess. With a deep breath, Tommy turned and walked toward the SUV, the snow swirling around him like a suffocating blanket. The storm had swallowed him whole, and now he had no choice but to follow it wherever it led. The SUV's door slammed shut with a dull thud, sealing Tommy inside with the two strangers, the man in the tactical jacket and the woman with the sharp, calculating gaze. The storm continued its relentless assault on the world outside. The wind howling like a beast, the snow swirling in every direction, making the outside world feel like an alien landscape. But inside the SUV, the air felt thick, suffocating with secrets and unspoken truths. Tommy's mind raced as the vehicle jolted forward, its tires crunching over the snow. The man and the woman remained silent, their attention focused outside the vehicle as though they were both waiting for something. Tommy's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts spiraling out of control. What was happening? Why had he been dragged into this strange and terrifying situation? The woman turned her gaze to him, her eyes flickering with something: pity, resignation. "You're not going to like what I'm about to tell you," she said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "But you need to understand. You're involved now, whether you like it or not." Tommy felt a cold chill settle in the pit of his stomach. "Involved in what?" he asked, his voice tight. "I don't even know who you people are or what's going on." The man in the front seat glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "You've already seen too much," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "It doesn't matter if you know the full story or not. You're already in it." Tommy tried to swallow the lump in his throat, but it felt like it was lodged there, blocking him from speaking. The adrenaline that had been pumping through his veins now felt like a heavy weight, and every word from these strangers seemed to confirm that he was in over his head. Whatever was happening, whatever mission they were on, it was something he had no part in, or at least he hadn't thought he did until now. The woman spoke again, her voice softer this time. "This is bigger than you can imagine, bigger than any of us. But you're a part of it now, whether you want to be or not." The man turned his attention back to the road, the SUV's headlights cutting through the snow-covered landscape ahead. "We're going to need your help," he said. "There's no way we can pull this off without you." Tommy's mind struggled to keep up with the fragments of conversation he was hearing. What did they need from him? What was this mission they were talking about? His mind was spinning, his thoughts a blur of confusion and fear. The woman seemed to sense his anxiety and spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "It's okay to be scared," she said. "I get it, but you need to listen. This isn't just some random operation. This is about something much bigger, something that could change everything." Tommy's heart skipped a beat. "What could change everything?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man glanced back at him once more, his eyes meeting Tommy's for a moment. "We were trying to retrieve something that was lost, a piece of technology. It's powerful, dangerous, and it could fall into the wrong hands. If it does, everything we know could be destroyed." Tommy's stomach twisted as the weight of the man's words settled in. A piece of technology, lost, destroy everything. The questions piled up in his mind, each one more pressing than the last. But before he could ask anything else, the woman spoke again, her tone more serious now. "We were tasked with retrieving it. We were part of a covert operation, a mission that had been planned for months, but something went wrong. Very wrong." Tommy felt a pit open up in his stomach. "What went wrong?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The woman's eyes grew distant as she spoke, as though remembering something painful. "The mission was compromised, our team was ambushed, the target was lost, and everything we've worked for, everything we've been trying to protect, is now in jeopardy." The man nodded, his face hardening. "We were supposed to get the technology back before anyone else could get their hands on it, but now it's out there, and the clock is ticking. We need to find it before it's too late." Tommy's mind was reeling, trying to piece together the pieces of this strange puzzle. He had stumbled into something far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. He was no longer just a truck driver in the middle of a snowstorm. He was now entangled in some kind of covert military operation, one that involved technology capable of destroying everything he knew. His hands trembled as he tried to process the gravity of the situation. "But why me? Why did you drag me into this?" The woman's eyes softened just for a moment before she spoke again. "We didn't drag you into this, Tommy. You were already involved the moment you found that Jeep in the snow. We didn't expect you to find it, but you did, and now we need you." The man leaned forward, his voice quiet but insistent. "The technology we were trying to recover wasn't just any piece of equipment. It was part of a top-secret military project, one that had been buried for years. We thought it was gone, lost in the snow. But now we know someone else is looking for it, someone much more dangerous." Tommy's mind raced as the words sank in. Lost technology, a secret military project, someone dangerous looking for it. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but they didn't make sense. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a part of any covert operation. He was just a truck driver who happened to find a Jeep in the snow. But now, somehow, he was caught in the middle of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. "Who's after it?" Tommy asked, his voice hoarse. The woman turned to him, her face grim. "We don't know yet. But whoever they are, they have the resources to make sure this doesn't end well. They'll stop at nothing to get their hands on what we were trying to recover." The SUV's headlights cut through the snow, the road stretching out before them like an endless white tunnel. The storm was relentless, but the vehicle seemed to slice through it effortlessly, its engine humming steadily as it carried them deeper into the unknown. Tommy felt the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He was scared. No, terrified. But he also felt something else. Something deep inside him stirred. A sense of purpose, a feeling of responsibility. He didn't know, but what he did know was that his life had been irrevocably changed. There was no going back to the way things had been. He wasn't just a truck driver anymore. He was now a part of something much bigger, something dangerous, and no matter how much he wanted to walk away from it, he knew there was no way out. They drove for what felt like hours, the silence in the SUV only broken by the occasional rustle of the wind outside. Tommy's thoughts swirled in a haze of fear, confusion, and disbelief. He had been pulled into this world of covert operations and military secrets by sheer accident, but now it was clear that this was his new reality. As they neared their destination, the woman spoke again, her voice more urgent this time. "We're almost there. We need to move quickly. If we don't get to the technology before they do, it's over." Tommy's heart hammered in his chest. "What do you need from me?" The woman's gaze locked onto his. "You know the terrain better than anyone. You'll help us navigate. We'll need you to get us to the location where we believe the technology is hidden." Tommy took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing pulse. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, but one thing was clear. He had no choice. He was in this now, whether he liked it or not. "We're in this together now," the man said, his voice calm but resolute. "And we're counting on you." The storm raged outside, but inside the SUV the cold was the least of Tommy's concerns. He was no longer just a bystander in someone else's mission. He was a part of it, and whether he was ready or not, the stakes were about to get much higher.